Hi everyone, welcome back to Management 453 Creativity and Innovation in Business. What we want to do today, my name is Neil Fogarty, by the way. I'm going to be your tour guide as we go through Chapter 3 today. We're going to be taking a look at the first of the 6 I's. We're going to be looking at identify. So Chapter 3, identify. And under Chapter 3, identify, I have 4 major topics for you. Four of them. And the first one, just some background information, make sure that we're all on the same page, that we're all pretty close to having the same launch point as we go for the rest of this chapter. The first point, I guess the author makes about 3. The first 3 of the 3 points that the author makes is she says something we said in our first class, and that is there's lots of change today, probably more so than ever before, and it's happening more quickly than ever before. Lots of change, fast change, and it's just going left and right and up and down, etc. So if you think about it, if everything is changing and if everything's changing fast, if you're going to survive in business, well, if you're going to survive as a human being, but if you're going to be surviving in business as you manage and lead these organizations, you have to make some adjustments, right? You have to kind of figure out what's going on. You have to be able to come up with these adjustments that are creative and innovative, that will fit your firm and the new environment, all the changes going on, fit those things together. So again, lots of change today, more so than ever before. Second point she makes of the 3 under the background is some problems on the rise. Okay, we got all this change, is this great and dandy, or do we have any problems? And she lists at least 3 problems. She said the first one, and the first one sounds a little odd to me, but after I thought about it, I think there's probably some foundation to it. She says the first problem, many decision makers and many organizations assume industry stability. They assume industry stability, and they assume that the rules remain unchanged. Now that sounds crazy because we know the world's changing. We know it's changing quickly. But it's interesting, most decision makers, at least according to her, and I think to a great degree she's right, most decision makers and most organizations are assuming, hey, things aren't changing. Industry stability, what worked yesterday is going to work today. But that's not the case. The rules constantly are being broken. They're constantly being changed. I mean, think about it. Not too long ago, the only way that you could get a ride from one place to another was to call a taxi cab. And there were various laws that said that you had to have licenses and all these other things, and you couldn't be a taxi unless you did this, that, and the other. Of course, then Uber came along. And, with regard to, if you're going on vacation someplace or you're traveling someplace and where are you going to stay? Well, you were going to stay in a hotel or a motel. Nowadays, no, there's been a change there. You're probably going to be staying, or many of you will be staying at, an Airbnb. So what we see again is the rules are indeed constantly changing, and they're constantly being broken with regard to that. The second major point that she makes under this, besides the fact of, okay, we assume industry stability and we're wrong, and she says that, there's, because of all these changes, because, what worked yesterday doesn't work today, there's so many discontinuities and disruptions, in the workplace and her life, and not only are there many, they're speeding up. The numbers are, they're absolutely growing with regard to this. And a good example of this, just in a more theoretical sense, is think about this. Every day you go into work, and your job, you've got a big, electronics board in front of you, etc., with all sorts of numbers and buttons, etc., that you got to push. And every day your job is to go in and to push, button A or key A. And every day when you push button A and key A, it does the same thing. Let's say, and I'll just make this up, it makes red bricks. So you want to make red bricks, you're in a red brick company or something like that. So what do you do every day? You go in and you push key A. One day, though, you go in and you push key A, instead of getting a red brick, you get a blue brick. Wait a minute, no, it's supposed to be red. So you punch A again, expecting a red brick. You get another blue one. Now you're starting to get frustrated, and you hit A a couple more times, you get a couple more blue bricks. This isn't right. And you look at the manual and you try this there and keep going, and you keep getting these damn blue bricks. So, eventually you pick up the phone and you call IT and you get a tech support or whatever, what's going on, etc., and they're coming out and they're, oh, geez, I'm sorry, nothing we can do, you're crazy, this, whatever it might be. If you've ever talked to tech support, you know what I'm talking about. So when you sit there and you look at it, certainly an incongruity, right? A should be getting me a red brick. A is now giving me a blue brick. So there's discontinuities. Things that used to work yesterday aren't working today. Well, how do we adjust? Well, one of the ways we adjust is we have to become creative and innovative. We have to fit this new environment, the environment where key A now makes blue bricks. Now, a good entrepreneur is going to think, well, is there a market for blue bricks? Can I go out and now I know how to make blue bricks? Nobody else does. I do, etc. But for the most part, again, this goes back to this point about these discontinuities that we have. And still under the problems, the third problem that she mentions, and this one also sounds a little odd, but again, when I start to think about it, there's foundation to it. And the third problem she says is having the skill to be able to identify new ways to react to, okay, I push A and I'm getting blue bricks. Having those skills to be creative and innovative, to figure out how I can fit into this new environment, fit all the new changes. Having the skill to identify new things and this creativity and new ideas or whatever, the identifier skill is weak in most organizations. Now you might say, that's crazy, there's innovative companies left and right. Well, there might be innovative companies left and right, but still the skill of innovation, coming up with something new, is weak. A student in my class the other day mentioned to me, saw a study that was out talking about creativity in individuals. And the study had said that in fact, I should add to this, they measured creativity, and God knows how they measure creativity in the study, but they measured creativity at people at various stages of their lives. And they had the preschoolers, and then they had the elementary schoolers, and then they had like high schoolers and college and adults or whatever. And what they found was the most creative, of course, were the preschoolers. They were doing all sorts of different things, etc. But by the time you got out of college and became an adult, your level of creativity was the lowest of them all. Well, this concept then of being an identifier, well, you probably identified creative and innovative ideas much better when you were, a 3-year-old toddler trying to figure out what to do, than in many ways than you are today. So this identifier skill, finding new and creative ways, innovative ways to do things, it's weak in most organizations. That finishes up under the background the second of the 3 points. So let's go to the third. She has a solution. We now know the problem, or the 3 problems that she gave. She has a solution. Her idea here is you want to be open to new ideas. Well, that sounds pretty good. You want to be curious. I think someone who is innovative and creative is probably somewhat curious, tried new things, etc. You want to be innovative and curious, and you want to identify new opportunities. You want to be able to spot areas that are fertile for change, and that can create these new opportunities. Basically, her solution: you want to be an identifier. You want to develop your identifier skills. So if you want to be very successful as a person, and also as part of some organization, some business or whatever, one of the things she thinks is this concept of, well, there's lots of change. We need people who can identify opportunities in these changes. We need people who can identify new and creative ways to adapt to these changes and take advantage of these changes. So if you want to be successful, what you want to do is you want to be an identifier. And if you don't have a lot of identifier skills, it's time to start to work on that. You want to be an identifier. You want to develop your identifier skills. That finishes up the first topic, the background. So let's go to the second topic. Remember, I said there are 4 major topics, etc. Let's go to the second. Again, the first one is background. The second, the identifier profile. Now, one of the things we're going to mention to you now, this being the first of the 6 I's that we're getting into in the textbook, the author, in each of her chapters on each of the 6 I's, structures the chapters very, very similarly. And you're going to see that my lecture notes are going to be structured very similarly. So this next major topic we're going to be covering in all the I's is going to be one of the early major topics. We'll start off with a background. Usually the second major topic will be a profile of whatever I we're looking at, or a person involved in that. So for the second major topic today, it's the identifier profile. The identifier profile. And under the identifier profile, she has three major points to raise, and these are things that, as I say, we're going to be doing regularly for each of the chapters when we get into profile. She's going to talk about the strengths. She's going to talk about the weaknesses or the challenges, and then she's also going to talk about do's and don'ts on how to manage these people and how to communicate with these people. So in our particular case, we're going to start off with the first of these, strengths of identifiers. Strengths of identifiers. Someone who is good at identifying new opportunities, good at identifying creative and innovative ways to do things and adapt or whatever, some strengths of them. And she lists 7 of them. One of the things I'll warn you about in advance, she has lots of lists as we go through these. I'll try to, at times shorten the list or go through the list fairly quickly. When you read through your textbook, though, make sure you get an idea of all the things in the list, and maybe you want to go through and in your notes write the list down. So let's start off with the strengths of an identifier. The first that she mentions, identifiers visualize and imagine the future. They visualize and imagine the future. They see things that other people don't see. You and I look at something and we're all saying, oh my goodness, that's horrible, etc. Somebody else who's an identifier will look and say, oh, look at all the great opportunities come out. Look at what we can do with that, etc. Let me give you a really good example of this. I'm going to pull up a slide here, and then I want to talk about it. So let me pull up this slide first. One of the most successful companies in the United States is Walt Disney, the Disney Company. And I think all of us, when we identify things associated with the Disney Company, we think of creative, new things that they're doing, innovative things they're doing, etc., creative. And Disney, recognizing the importance of having identifiers, Disney has an interesting department within its organization, a fairly critical department, particularly given how most of us identify Disney. A lot of places will have an engineering department. Well, they have one too, but they have another department that uses a name kind of similar to it that relates this concept of identifiers about having creative people, and this is Imagineering. They have a department of Imagineering. Yeah, engineering, they got down the hallway, but they have another one, Department of Imagineering. This is where we're looking for those creative and those innovative people. Again, Imagineering, there's a buzzword for you, right? The second of the strengths that we have here, identifiers can identify trends and patterns, and they see, what opportunities those trends and patterns offer. They identify trends and patterns, and they see what opportunities those new trends and new patterns, offer. Now, again, think about this. First off, a lot of us don't even see patterns, and trends very well. But an identifier does. Identifier looks at something and sees how things are changing, where they're moving, etc., how they're generally structured with, the patterns, etc., and trends. And we might look at it and we say, oh my gosh, look at the change. Oh, this makes no sense to me or whatever. But a good identifier, someone who is an identifier, has various strengths. One of the things they're going to do is they're going to look at that and they're going to see opportunities. Let me give you an example here. In the Pittsburgh region, one of the things that you see in the Pittsburgh region is the population is aging. Most of the young people that graduate from, they have a zillion colleges and universities around Pittsburgh. Most of the young people who graduate from them tend to move away. They don't stay there. And as a result, the number of new people or younger people in the area doesn't really grow and oftentimes declines, whereas the number of older people, they tend to stay there. They tend not to move away. So what we see is we have a population that's getting older and older. Now, some people look at that trend and they say, oh my God, if I'm in business, I'm getting out of here. I want to follow, the younger generations or whatever. I don't want to stay with the older generations. But at the same time, Someone who's an identifier will look at that trend, that new pattern that's developed, and say, hey, is there an opportunity here? Yeah, I know the young people have moved away, and there's all sorts of business, they, are associated with that we could, sell to them or whatever. But how about with regard to this new trend, the fact that we're getting older? Are there any business opportunities here? Well, think about it. Older people, what do they tend to buy a lot of? How about medical care, pharmacies, and things like that? So one of the things that you see in the Pittsburgh area is healthcare has grown to be one of the largest, if not the largest industry in Pittsburgh, whereas years ago was the steel mills or whatever. So what we see here is, again, an identifier is go see these trends and patterns and go look for opportunities that they offer. Let's go to the third strength that's mentioned by the author, and that is that identifiers tend to be forward-thinking. They tend to be strategic. They tend to notice and see things that other people don't. They tend to be, again, forward-thinking, strategic, and see things that other people don't. If you think about it, think about some of the things that Steve Jobs came up with early in his career at Apple. At the time, nobody owned personal computers, desktop computers, or whatever. And yet Steve looked and he saw, kind of saw into the future. He kind of had a crystal ball, gave him an idea of, what was going to be happening. It was very forward-thinking and strategic, and positioned the company to develop and take it, advantage of and move all these new things, new products, etc., that he was bringing to the market. So again, they're forward-thinking and they're strategic, and again, they see and notice things that other people don't. Let's go to the fourth strength that's mentioned by the author. The fourth identifier, identifier is good, has a strength here, will be curious, will have lots of interests and a desire to learn. Identifier, curious, lots of interest and a desire to learn. I mean, think about it. If you're trying to identify new things, you probably want to learn new things too, right? Let's go to the fifth of the strengths of an identifier. Identifiers have a positive outlook. They see where others people see problems, they see opportunities. You've heard that concept of, some people see the glass as half full or half empty. Oftentimes you'll see that an identifier tends to be more positive, tends to look at these things and, yes, it's horrible, but we can fix it. Look at what we can do in a situation like that. So let me now go to another slide that kind of gives you an idea of this, and I'll talk about it. And this involves a person or a cartoon character that you probably watched when you were a kid. So let's So you look at that slide. Say, okay, SpongeBob and on Mars or the moon or whatever, what's going on? You might have seen that episode that SpongeBob had. It had at least one, maybe a couple, where he went to the moon or Mars or whatever. He also had an episode where he and the squirrel, I think Sandy, they ran across these huge, giant, man-eating or I guess sponge-eating and squirrel-eating worms, etc. These massive worms or whatever. So let me put those together and let me show you what I mean here with regard to this concept of having a positive outlook. Let's say that SpongeBob and Patrick get a job where they go to Mars. Let's say we're colonizing Mars, or we're hoping to. We're starting to explore Mars or whatever, and we hope to colonize Mars. And let's assume that one of the problems with developing colonies up there, before you've got water and air and all sorts of things, the temperature. But one of the problems that's up there, let's say that they find all these man-eating, people-eating worms up there, these massive worms or whatever. So they decide, hey, we've got to do something. We've got to capture them and maybe take them to the other side of Mars, or take them to one of the moons or something on Mars. So let's say that they hire SpongeBob and Patrick to go to Mars, and what they say to them is this: listen, for every one of these worms or whatever that you capture and are able to relocate to some other place, we're going to give you some sort of bounty. We're going to give you some sort of reward or whatever, $1,000 for each one or something like that. So they go up to Mars and they, land, and they put up, some sort of little bubble tent or something, that they're going to live in and whatever. So they're in there the first night, and morning comes along, and they hear some sounds outside. Let's assume it's not a plastic bubble where they can see outside. So, they open up the curtains or whatever, and they look outside, and they see that they're completely surrounded by these man-eating worms. They're all over the place. Now, a normal person, like Patrick, if Patrick is normal, would say, "Oh my God, we're going to be eaten, we're going to be devoured, we're going to die." But a positive person, let's say in this case it's SpongeBob, a positive person, someone who is an identifier, will look and say, "Oh, yeah, man, we're surrounded by this. We're going to get rich. We're going to capture all these and look at all the ones we can capture, etc. We're going to get rich." So what we tend to see is that these identifiers tend to have a positive outlook. Again, they see opportunities where we see problems. Well, let's go to the sixth strength, as mentioned by the author here, is identifiers tend to be outward-looking and very interested in the world. Outward-looking and interested in the world. They tend not to be, although they certainly can be, but they tend not to be introverted. They tend to be outward-looking, and they might not be great at interacting with people, probably more so than we give them credit for. But they usually don't shut themselves in a cave. They usually don't shut themselves in a room. They like to learn and explore, maybe just learning and exploring on their computer, but they're outward looking and they're interested in the world, what's going on. And the seventh and final strength that is mentioned by the author here is that identifiers are good at adding new people to their network, to their teams, and new people to their network and teams. Now, you've heard the phrase, "It's not what you know, it's who you know." And I think there's another saying out there, it's not the degree you get, it's the hands you shake, or something like that. So what we're talking about here is, think about this. If we're looking to be creative and innovative, if we're looking for opportunities, one of the things we probably have to do is we probably have to network. We probably have to know more and more people with regard to that. Think about it, since you've been here at school. Think about the opportunities you didn't know about yourself, but someone told you about. You met somebody at a party or on a bus stop or on a bus or whatever, and you're talking. It's like, "Oh, did you hear about?" No, you hadn't. And that new opportunity, that leads you to opportunities to be creative and innovative. So you tend to find that people who are good identifiers tend to be good at adding people to their network. They tend to be good at joining more teams and organizations, etc., because indeed that can help them to identify new opportunities and ways to be creative and innovative. So under the identifier profile, the 3 points that we're going to look at, we just finished the first, strengths of an identifier. Let's now go to the second point. The second point under identifier is this profile is challenges. Challenges or weaknesses. If you have a good identifier, that's wonderful. They should identify new opportunities and other things like that. But what can be their weaknesses? What can be the problem of having an identifier, a good identifier on the team? Are they always good, or like everything in life, is it kind of a balance? And with regard to these challenges, the author mentions 4. She says the first challenge they have, maybe perhaps weakness, depending on how you want to look at it, is they see the big picture, which is really good, but they oftentimes miss the details. They see the big picture. Oh, they paint in these broad strokes, and they've got this great vision. They see the big picture that oftentimes none of the rest of us do, and that's great. But the trouble is, oftentimes they miss the details, and you probably have heard the phrase, "The devil's in the details." Oftentimes you get these wonderful ideas, let's do this, let's do that, and then as you start to do it, all of a sudden you find, "Oh my gosh, I got to get this and I got to do that," and the details are, the problem. They keep you from actually doing something, or really slow it down, make it more expensive, or in time and money or whatever. So again, one of the challenges of identifiers, they're great, they're dreamers. They see the big picture, but they oftentimes miss the details. Let's go to the second challenge that she mentions. They look to the future, which is really cool, right? We want them to, have that crystal ball like Steve Jobs, thinking people in the future are going to need laptops and PCs and desktops and everything else like that. They look towards the future, but oftentimes in doing so, they lose focus on the present. They lose focus on the present. Let me give you a really easy example for this. Have you ever been out and you're walking along, and maybe you're on a sidewalk someplace, and you're walking along and you're so excited about where you're going? Oh, I want to get there. Or you see somebody you want to talk to, so you're looking up. Because you're looking up, you're not looking down where you're walking, and the sidewalk's uneven. You hit something, you fall, right on your face or whatever. That tends to happen to a lot of people who are good identifiers. They're looking this way, and they forget to look at today. They forget to recognize that, hey, some of the things going on in the present are going to have an impact. Maybe negative, maybe positive, but going to have an impact on this vision that I have. So again, they look to the future but lose focus on the present. Another challenge, the third one, is identifiers are easily bored. Now let's face it, you're probably already bored with this lecture, right? You're sitting there, oh my God, what I got to do? And when you're in classroom, the same thing, you get easily bored. Being bored is horrible. And being bored, generally speaking, can be a real killer of any aspirations you have to be creative and innovative. Some people in boredom do. They figure out something to do. But nowadays, oftentimes if we're bored, we just zone out or whatever. We don't dream, we don't do things or whatever. So one of the challenges of identifiers, if you have a great one in your organization, you've got to be careful. Don't bore him or her, because if that person gets bored, they're probably not going to be very creative and innovative for you, and they might be getting a job and going to your competition down the street and taking their innovative and creative ideas down there. Well, let's go to the fourth of the challenges that are mentioned here. Oftentimes you'll find these, great identifiers, etc., and they broad visions and everything else like that. They're really very abstract and conceptual in what they see, right? Very abstract and very conceptual. And it's really hard to communicate these abstract thoughts and visions or whatever to others, It's very hard to inspire others with it. Let me give you a good example of this. My guess is all of you on at least one occasion, probably multiple, you're sleeping at night and you have this dream right before you wake up. It's like, oh my gosh, and you can't wait to tell somebody about your dream, about this, that, and the other. Do you realize how hard it is to tell somebody about a dream? Because dreams don't have much logic to them, and also, as you try to tell them this, you're missing details. Of course, your dream is fading in memory already, etc. So it's very difficult to communicate the abstract and conceptual. And yet, if you're an identifier and you have these abstract dreams and visions, etc., the conceptual dreams and visions, you have to communicate with them, because just having it in your head, well, that's not going to be very good. So you have to be able to communicate with them. You have to, get them involved, excited about it, etc. And you don't want to think, you probably heard this phrase, well, you had to be there to really understand it. No, as a communicator, as a identifier, what you have to do is you have to communicate these great dreams that you have to others, and that's not easy. So that finishes up the challenges part of this. Again, we're still in a profile. We looked at the strengths, we looked at the challenges, the weaknesses. Let's go to the third and the final point that the author has under the profile, and this goes to do's and don'ts regarding managing and communicating with identifiers. Do's and don'ts with regard to managing and communicating with identifiers. I think you can understand that whatever business you have, you want to be innovative and creative, or at least have some innovative and creative people on board. And that probably means, according to what she says, and I think she's right, you want to have some people who are identifiers. They can identify these new opportunities and come up with these creative ideas or whatever. You want to have identifiers. So how do you manage them? Let's say you have an identifier, a couple of identifiers on your team. How do you manage them? What do you do? What don't you do? What do you say? What don't you say? This is what she's trying to get to here. So let's start off with the do's. She has 4 things that you want to do, and then we'll go to the don'ts. She has 4 things you don't want to do. And there's probably more, but I think these are good to get you started. with regard to some of the things that you want to do as their boss. You want to be open-minded to possibilities and opportunities. If you have an identifier, if you have a dreamer on the team, you know this person's going to be coming up to you and telling you about things that they haven't happened yet. They're not everywhere. Very few, if any, people ever did this. So you're looking and say the probability of this is so low, etc., and you won't even look at it. You know, you really have to be open-minded. You have to be able to look at possibilities and not just probabilities, you know, with regard to these opportunities. I want you to think about this. Again, going back to Steve Jobs and when he started Apple. One of the things that occurred when he started Apple, he was working with a fellow named Steve Wozniak. They both basically started Apple. They were the two main founders. There were a couple of others that also joined in early on. But Wozniak, amongst other things, was probably the more technical of the two. And he came up with this thing that eventually became the Apple I, certainly with Steve Jobs and his vision and stuff. And Wozniak was the guy kind of putting the vision together and making it happen and turning it into what would be pretty much the first mass-marketed PC in the United States. So they come up with this, and one of the things that is a problem for them is Wozniak, like a lot of college students, is an intern working someplace else, and he was a tech guy, so he was working for a tech company. And he was working for, I believe, HP, Hewlett-Packard, and he had signed an agreement with Hewlett-Packard when he got the job as an intern that any ideas he would come up with, any ideas he came up with, he had to give Hewlett-Packard the first right of refusal to it. So if he came up with a brand new idea, he had to go to them first and say, hey, listen, before I can use it or I sell it to somebody else or whatever, I got to give you the chance. Do you want it? So with regard to the Apple I, that's exactly what he had to do. So he goes off to HP, and he talks to one of the executives, actually probably a couple of them, but he talks to one of the executives and says, hey, here's this new thing you've never heard of before. It's going to be a desktop computer. It's the Apple I. And this is an early stage prototype. Heck, it's made more, it's got wood in it. You know, have you ever seen a computer with wood? That's because they didn't go out and make the plastic yet because it's just so early. Let's just kind of make what we can. It's made of wood. And he goes to this fellow at HP and said, here's my idea. This is what it does, etc. And the fellow there, now he has an identifier in front of him, right? Certainly Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, was one there, is an identifier. Look at this new opportunity. And yet the guy looks at it and says, why on earth would an ordinary person want a computer? Now, you folks keep it. Now think about that. First off, had he made the other decision, said, no, HP is going to keep it, we probably never would have heard of Apple computer, right? They never would have come out with the Apple I or anything else like that. This thing would belong to HP. I don't know if they would have developed it or not, but it would belong there. So why did he say no? Well, he said no because, you know, the probability of having a small computer that did anything that people could use back then was nil. All the computers back then were huge mainframe computers. You had to be a computer graduate, some computer science graduate or something. And even then, the stuff that was millions of dollars and didn't do half the stuff that your cell phone does nowadays. So based on what he knew, based on what was going on all over, the probability of this wooden thing on his desk having any value is nil. So why would an ordinary person want a computer? They can't operate them. They can't afford them. They don't do anything for them. You should have been open-minded to the possibilities and the opportunities. So the first of the do's, be open-minded. The second do when you go to manage these identifiers is you want to let them explore. You want to let them explore. Remember in an earlier chapter we said we're pioneers. People who are innovative, creative, etc., they're pioneers. Well, probably one of the most pioneering of the pioneers are the identifiers. They're thinking up new ideas that nobody else has seen before. So you want to give them time to explore. You're working for you. Give them time to explore. An example I'll give to you now is a company that at least up until recently did this, and I think it still does, but I don't know, was Google. Google on every Friday, Google would let its employees, you had to go to work or a telecommute, to work online or whatever. You had to work. But Friday was your day. You didn't work on a project that Google assigned to you. You worked on your own project. Maybe you got together a couple of buddies at Google or whatever, and you came up with a new idea. You would work on coming up with something new. This is called a Google Friday. This is certainly an opportunity for their employees, for their identifiers to explore, to be pioneers. Another do that is mentioned here by the author is you want to stimulate the imagination and visions of those identifiers you have working for you. You don't want to throw cold water on them and blankets on them, cold blankets or whatever. You want to stimulate them. Great idea. What else can we do? Can we do this? Can we do that? You want to stimulate their imagination and their visions. And then finally, related to that, the final do is you want to encourage them to trailblaze and pioneer. Encourage them to trailblaze and pioneer. Yes, go and try this. Look at that. Come back. Tell me what you find, etc. like that. You want to encourage them. You want to pat them on the back. You want to give them good words and good, enthusiasm to do this, pioneering they're going to do. Well, now let's turn to the don'ts. Some things you don't want to do. Right? Those are 4 do's. Here are 4 don'ts. The first don't is you manage and communicate with them. You don't want to narrow down their discovery zones or focus them on the present. Yeah, we know that one of the problems is they look at the future and they trip over what's below them. But they're dreamers. We want them to dream. We don't want to, say, hey, listen, no. I don't want you to think about this, and I want you to think about what's going on today. That's not them. You do that. You tell them, hey, listen, your discovery zone is 0. I'm not, listen, to heck with this stuff. Get done with the stuff that's on your desk or whatever. They're probably going to quit. They're probably going to be very frustrated, and they're certainly not going to be coming up with great ideas and giving them to you because you don't want that. Let's go to the second of the don'ts. You don't want to force them to work on maintaining current systems and processes. Keyword there, current. You don't want to force them to work on maintaining current systems and processes. They don't want to live today. They don't want to continue the status quo. They don't want to continue doing the same old. They want to come up with the new, something different, etc., something creative and innovative, etc. If you force them to maintain the current stuff, again, they're going to, be frustrated and probably leave and go find employment someplace else. Related to this, you don't want to limit them to the ordinary and the mundane. The ordinary mundane. Here, go through and, add up all the numbers on this sheet. Here, go through and put all these boxes in the right place in the warehouse or whatever. It's mundane. One of the reasons they're creative is they don't like doing mundane. They like doing the new stuff, the exciting stuff to them. If you have them just doing the ordinary mundane, they're going to once again get frustrated with you. And then the final don't that she has here, and so far as how you communicate and manage with them, is don't restrain their thinking to day-to-day challenges. Don't restrain their thinking to day-to-day challenges. Yeah, it's great, if you can tell me how to fix something I do every day, day-to-day, etc. But they're looking long-term. They're looking down the road. They're looking weeks, months, years, and maybe even decades into the future. And if you have them doing day-to-day things, well, once again, they're probably going to be pretty frustrated with you. So that finishes up her list of don'ts, and we just talked about a list of do's. That finishes up the second major topic about the profile of an identifier. We looked at the strengths, we looked at the weaknesses or challenges, and we looked at how do you manage them, how do you communicate with them, the do's and the don'ts. Let's go to the third major topic today, identifier skills. Identifier skills. These are the skills that you would expect a good identifier to have. Let me go over a couple of these skills that you would pretty much expect a good identifier to have. If you were interviewing people and etc., and you want to hire someone to be an identifier for your organization, these are probably some of the things you're going to look at. Do they have it? Do they have the skill set needed to be an identifier? So she has on this list of skills, she has a list of 6. There we go, another list. I'm sorry about that. The first of these skills is to envision and imagine the future. To envision and imagine the future. Remember Imagineering, etc., that we talked about? I have another example for you. I'm going to show that slide to you now. And it involves, oddly, someone talking at a funeral. Their brother this person's brother had died, and this person was delivering a eulogy. Well, how can a eulogy at a funeral have anything to do with innovation and creativity? Well, let me first bring up Now, with regard to the slide, I'm not going to get into a great amount of detail of what we're doing, but what we had here is back in the 1960s, you probably know that one of our presidents was a fellow by the name of John Kennedy, President John Kennedy. And John Kennedy had a couple of brothers, and the two that were still surviving at the time he was president, he had one named Joe who passed away during the Second World War 20-some odd years before. But the two he had a brother named Bobby and another brother named Ted, or Teddy Kennedy, Bob Kennedy, Ted Kennedy. And Bob Kennedy was a senator from New York, and Ted Kennedy became a U.S. Senator from Massachusetts. Bob Kennedy, in the late 60s, decided to run for president, and as he was running for president, unfortunately, somebody assassinated him. He was murdered, shot out in California during, I guess, right around the primary in California just ended, and he had won, and then he was shot as he was leaving the reception area, etc., and I guess in the kitchen. So at his funeral, his only surviving brother now, Ted, delivered a eulogy. And Ted said something, and it's on the slide that we have here, and it's very important with regard to the concept of an identifier. And talking about his brother Bobby, who he thinks was someone who was creative, innovative, was an identifier, he said the following. He said, he didn't see things as they are and ask why. Why are they this bad, whatever. Instead, he dreamed things that never were and asked why not. He didn't look at things as they are and ask why. He dreamed things that never were and asked why not. That's somebody who has a skill set to be this, this identifier, this dreamer that we have. Because he's looking at the future. He dreams things that never were and asks, why not? Why can't we do this, etc.? Certainly a skill set with regard to being able to envision and imagine the future. Let's go to the second of the identifier skills. She says a good identifier will see and understand trends. Well, we mentioned that before. That's absolutely true. The third of the skills that she mentions is to have a positive outlook and spot opportunities. Yep, mentioned that before too. Those are pretty good skills that we have. Let's go to the fourth of the identifier skills, to expand your personal connections and network. Be able to expand your personal connections and your networks that you have. That's not necessarily easy. I mean, I'm not the type of person who really likes to go out and, introduce myself to all sorts of new people and strangers or whatever. I do, but I don't necessarily like it. But to be an identifier, you really have to do that. You have to extend your personal connections. You have to extend that network. Let's go to the fifth skill of an identifier. You have to be able to enable others to look for new opportunities. Be able to enable others to look for new opportunities. This involves at least two things. One of the things we mentioned and one that's not. The thing that we mentioned, if you come up with some brand new idea, this new vision, etc., what you want to do, the odds are you have to encourage other people to get on board. Either bosses to approve it, or people to give you money for it, or people to help you out with it, or whatever. You have to encourage others to say, yeah, great idea here. So one of the things that you want to be able to do is you want to enable others to look at your idea and say, this is good. Remember he said how hard it is to, explain your dream to somebody. You not only have to explain it to them, you have to get them to like it and want it, etc. But also related to that, a very important aspect of being able to enable others to look for new opportunities is this course is talking about not only being creative and innovative yourself, but as a leader, you want to generate creativity and innovation amongst your employees. So one of the things you want to do as a good identifier is you have to be able to help other people to develop those identifier skills. We mentioned before what you should do. Well, great, you have it. What about your employees at work? Odds are many of them don't have it. Odds are you can help them to develop those skills. So that's what we're talking about, number 5. Number 6 is you want to be able to provide strategic direction to others to help them explore these possibilities. What are we going to do? I've got this great idea. Let me tell you how we're going to get there. Let me tell you how we're going to implement this wonderful new idea. We're going to turn this from, this vision in my head, we're going to turn it into something that we can take to the marketplace and sell. That finishes up the third of the four major topics under this chapter. So let's go to the fourth and the final major topic. The fourth and the final major topic that I have for you here talks about this thing called the identifier mindset. The identifier mindset. And again, remember I told you, this author is going to break down all these I's pretty much the same. Usually one of the last things she's going to talk about. It's not necessarily last because it's not important. It's last just because it's what she came to. It's oftentimes perhaps one of the most important things, and that's mindset. We talked about mindset in our first or second class. Mindset is so important for creativity. Your mindset will give an idea on any given day. How do you feel? What's your attitude? What's your mindset? What makes you tick? What flows through your system, etc. It's probably going to have a lot to do with how creative you are. So what's the identifier mindset? She mentions a couple of things here, and I'll mention them as well. First, the mindset is a compelling desire to learn and experience something new. Someone who's an identifier has a compelling desire to learn and experience something new. And related to that, part of this mindset, and this goes to something we talked about also in the first day, she said their mindset involves curiosity. These are people who are curious. They want to try new things. They want to come up with new things and try new things. They tend to be curious. I do have a couple of subpoints though for this, or examples for you here. Still talking about this identifier mindset, a couple of thoughts for you. First, oftentimes you'll find that identifiers will follow a business strategy that you may have heard of before. And this is called, definitely a buzzword phrase for you, the blue ocean strategy. The blue ocean strategy. What's that? There's really two types of strategies related to this. You have something called a blue ocean and something called a red. So let me start off not by telling you about the blue, let me tell you about the red. Most businesses, when they start up, they enter an industry and they position themselves in the industry near other competitors. And this could be, just, in the industry, we're all, the high cost, low cost, whatever time, someplace in the industry they locate. But it could also be just, physical location. And it's not only physical, but it's easier for me to explain it by just talking about physical location. Think about this, whatever hometown you come from, is there an area in your hometown where there's a lot of fast food restaurants that have come together? Or is there an area in your hometown where there's a lot of car dealerships that have come together? When they do that, when they cluster together, when they get closer to competition, they're fighting each other, for that customer. Customer who's going down the street wants a hamburger. Wendy's wants you, McDonald's wants you, Burger King wants you, whatever. Someone who's coming down wants to buy a car. The Chevy dealer wants you, the Buick dealer wants you, Jeep wants you, Toyota wants you, Volkswagen wants you, etc. They're all fighting to get your attention, to get your sale. So if you think about it, oftentimes when there's fighting going on, blood is flowing. Right now in business, you don't usually have blood flowing, but think about that. When you have this hostile type of environment where there is this competition going on, there's at least a virtual type of blood flowing. Well, if you look at yourself as I'm in an ocean, and if you're in an ocean where everybody's fighting, all the pirate ships are together and they're all shooting each other, etc., like that, oftentimes blood gets in the water. What color does it turn the water? What color does it turn the ocean? Red. So a red ocean strategy, one that I think most businesses follow, is let's locate close to our competitors, whether we're talking physically close, like having our car lot or a burger joint close by, or whether just in the positioning ourselves in the industry, we're going to be the low-cost producer, we're going to be the luxury of something. They tend to focus and cluster near others, and we have that red water, we have that red ocean strategy. Oftentimes you'll find that people who are very creative and innovative, people who are entrepreneurial, they tend to say, the heck with that. I'm going to go someplace and do something that nobody else has done before. I'm coming up like with Steve Jobs with a desktop computer that nobody thought of before. When you go into the ocean where there's no fighting, no other competition, there's no blood in the water because no one's fighting, there's nobody else there. This is called a blue ocean strategy. The water is blue, it doesn't turn red, there's no blood, the water is blue. They oftentimes will follow a blue ocean strategy. So you want to know the buzz phrase of red ocean strategy and blue ocean strategy. Now, related to that, oftentimes you'll find that one of the key strategies that a lot of businesses use is they use a strategy called differentiation. There's a buzzword for you, differentiation. And it's a big word, but you can see in the middle of it, or I'm sorry, at the beginning of it, you can see what it's focusing on being different. Think about it. You're coming up with this creative and innovative idea. You're probably unique. You're probably different than all the rest. So are you following a strategy of copying everybody? No, you're following a strategy of being different. This is called a differentiation strategy. It's one of the most successful strategies out there. If you can come up with a way of being different from your competition, particularly different in a way that your customers like, maybe lower your costs, maybe makes a better product or whatever like that, this differentiation strategy can help you. Someone who is in a blue ocean is doing something different. They've gone someplace different. They're following a differentiation strategy. Well, let me conclude today and let me wrap up with one more slide. Let me go and let me show you this slide. It's related to a TV series that was back in the 1960s, related to a series of movies that came out probably in the 80s. And then there are all sorts of subsequent TV offshoots, series offshoots from this. And you might have heard of this before. So let me first bring up the slide of this TV series, of this movie series, and then we talk about it. As you can see, the TV series, the movies, etc., they were known by the name of Star Trek. They had different Star Trek, this, that, the other, but it was Star Trek. And with regard, certainly with the original series and the original movies, and I think they've kept it with some of the offshoots as well. Oftentimes, it would start, with you see some starship like you see in that picture, going out into space or whatever, and usually you would hear the voice of one of the main actors. It's usually the actor was Captain Kirk. Captain James Kirk was the main actor of the early Star Treks. He was a captain of that starship that you see there, the Starship Enterprise. And he would oftentimes, you'd hear his voice or the voice of the person who was acting him. You would hear this person say, going where no person has gone before. Going where no person has gone before. Talking about Star Trek. We're going where no person has gone before. Well, if you think about it, that's what an identifier is doing. An identifier is going where no person has gone before. An identifier is identifying something new, something different, something in that blue ocean or whatever that's not been done before, maybe not have been thought of before, and is doing something where, again, it's unique, it's different, and this person is going where no person has gone before. So Star Trek has an awful lot to do with innovation and creativity, and particularly with this concept, this I of identifier. Well, I hope you enjoyed the lecture that we had today. I'm sure it was lengthy, etc., and you're probably ready to shoot yourself. Oh my gosh, I can't do this any longer. But hopefully we set up some parameters for you because of the 6 I's. And again, it's a circle. It can start anywhere in a circle you want. But most people, including the author, starts off with the identifier mindset. So if you can get this first I under your belt, if you can kind of figure out what it's all about, then maybe the other 5 I's coming along will follow suit, and this will turn into something that you can really use and that can really help you. I hope that's the case. I hope you're an identifier. I hope you're innovative and creative as well. Hope you enjoyed the lecture. If you have any questions, certainly let me know. I'll see you next time.